All right. Hi, everyone, again. For the recording, I guess, my name is Rabbi Adam Freiberg. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the assistant rabbi here at the Young Israel of Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale. Thank you so much for joining us, this is a bittersweet moment. It's been a wonderful opportunity for all these synagogues to join together and learn and study so many works, 4 books. Unfortunately, missed one because of unforeseen circumstances, but 4 books of Rabbi Sacks. And I really think it just helped us touch upon the fact of how big Rabbi Sacks' library truly was. We called this a foray into the literary library of Rabbi Sacks. And so I think it really just showed how blessed we were to have Rabbi Sacks as such a leader in our community. And the book we're about to hear, Rabbi Starr, for those who don't know, Rabbi Starr is the senior rabbi of his synagogue in Atlanta. And so his synagogue, or HaTorah, in Atlanta, Georgia. And just before I turn over the floor to him, we are very blessed to hear him review tonight the book, Rabbi Sacks' book, A Letter in the Scroll. Not one of the newer books, but a timeless book, and actually a very timely book considering the unfortunate circumstances in the world right now, where we've seen a rapid increase in anti-Semitism, seemingly overnight, or at least it feels that way. And we're reminded once again of this age-old terrible issue. And unfortunately, way too many Jews define themselves by anti-Semitism. They only feel Jewish when other people call them Jewish, and not necessarily in a nice way, and when other people single them out. But Rabbi Sacks, in this wonderful book, which we're going to hear about, seeks to flip this narrative. Instead of focusing on only why they hate us and how it could be that we've survived for so many years, despite all those who tried to wipe us out, he chooses to focus on the positive. What it is about Judaism that is beautiful, what it is about Judaism that is precious, what it is about Judaism that's so special, that has helped it sustain itself, and not only just sustain itself, but flourish for the last 2,000 years. And again, Judaism has not only maintained itself as a religion, but it's made a disproportional mark on human civilization. And perhaps, as some of you already know, this book was originally written as a wedding gift for his son and daughter-in-law. And it was his personal answer to that question. But just like this was a gift for his kids, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'd just like to end by reflecting on what a gift all his writings are to all of us and to the whole world. And again, we've had the wonderful opportunity to review 4 of his books. And for those who missed any of the reviews, please feel free to check out the Young Israel of Hollywood's YouTube channel, where you can see the recordings of the other 4 presentations. But we just barely touching his writings, he has tens and tens of books. You see the value and the insight they provide. And he spoke in such a sensitive and digestible way that his Torah, his thoughts were presentable and relevant to everyone, religious Jews, non-religious Jews, and non-Jews. He had such a clear way of writing and presenting. He was able to touch on the core issues that he's just so missed. And so, without further ado, I turn over the floor to Rabbi Starr. I thank him for being our final presenter, and I look forward to hearing wonderful words of Torah and a presentation. This should be an Ilui Neshama for Rabbi Sacks, but it should also be an inspiration for all of us to grow, to strive, and to try to become ambassadors towards other Jews and towards the whole world.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Freiberg. I'm really honored to be one of the rabbis that was chosen to be part of this beautiful lecture series, where we have the opportunity to memorialize Rabbi Sacks in his own words, through his own teachings. I found myself, as I was preparing for this talk, really almost a disconnect. On the one hand, I'm reading the words of Rabbi Sacks. Not only am reading the words, as I'm reading his words, I hear his voice. I hear his distinct voice, his distinct accent, his distinct presentation skills, a beautiful orator. And it's like a disconnect. It's hard to believe that he has left this world. But as we know, Torah scholars never truly leave this world, because they leave us a tremendous legacy of Torah that we continue to nourish ourselves and our souls through the Torah that he has taught. The book that I selected to discuss is one of the earlier books of Rabbi Sacks. It was actually written, as Rabbi Freiberg said, in the year 2000, a gift to his son and new daughter-in-law upon their wedding, as he was looking to pass on a legacy to the next generation. And I want to share why this book is somewhat different than the other books that have been studied as part of this lecture series. If you look at Rabbi Sacks's writings, and what many things made him great, was that his writings could fall into two groups. I'm sure there are many more categories we could put them in, but for now, let's put them in two categories. There was his writings that were written for what we'll call an internal audience. Internal audience means writing for his own people, his own co-religionists, the people that, for the most part, lived a similar life that he did, people a part of the Jewish community. His commentary on the Siddur, the Koren Sacks Siddur, certainly falls into that category. His writings on the weekly Parsha, Covenant and Conversation, certainly fall into that category. His beautiful commentaries on my favorite actually is his commentary on Yom Kippur. If you haven't read Rabbi Sacks' commentary on the Yom Kippur Machzor, you're missing Yom Kippur. You got to read it. It's amazing. But most of his books, per se, were actually for a much broader community. Rabbi Sacks' greatness is that he was not just a rabbi for the Jews, but he was a rabbi for the non-Jews as well. He brought the wisdom of Judaism to the world. And that's what many of his works, even his last work, Morality, was really of that genre, of taking the wisdom of Judaism. But what does the world need to hear? What is the message of the world needs to be fixed? But this book, The Letter and the Scroll, is really a very, very exclusively Jewish book. Of course, there are values that can be taken beyond, but it's written for a Jewish audience, an internal audience. And it's almost, in this book, he's like a grandfather sitting down with his grandchildren and saying, this is what you need to hear. This is what it's all about. Let me share what my Judaism is to me, so that hopefully you can glean some of that and appreciate what it is. In many ways, this book is where he presents his theology of Judaism itself. And in the way Rabbi Sacks could do it like no other, I heard this term today. I was actually very blessed that there was a conference I was participating in today, a rabbinical conference of rabbis of the Rabbinical Council of America, and they're actually one of the sessions with Rabbi Sacks. So I got some good material. And one of the speakers says, Rabbi Sacks's writing, it's so true, is simple, but not simplistic. So sometimes when you read the writings of great scholars, it can be extremely confusing. Your head can be spinning, and certainly the average audience doesn't fully appreciate what is being said. Rabbi Sacks had a gift that he wrote with such tremendous clarity in a simple way, but with depth. Okay, he took complex ideas, profound ideas, but presented them in ways that were digestible. So let me introduce you to a little bit of this book. I mean, you could take every chapter in this book and give a class, okay? And a whole class on the fundamentals of Judaism, going chapter by chapter. I can't do that. But I hope to give, I think, the overarching message of what he wants to present here, what is the message of his book. And also, as Rabbi Freiberg opened up, we live in times, unfortunately, where the anti-Semitism is on the rise. And you'll see towards the end of my presentation, some of Rabbi Sacks's writing that really speak, it's really almost prophetic, I have to say, that really speak to a message that he wrote in 2000. We're in 2021, we're facing anti-Semitism in ways we haven't in a long time. And it's almost like he's giving us a message that we need to hear right now. It's amazing. So what is Rabbi Sacks writing this book to do ultimately? He's actually writing this book to answer very, well, of course, simple, yet very complex question. The question that he's here to answer is, why be Jewish? Why be Jewish? That is what he's writing this book to do. Why in the 21st century? Why be Jewish? And he notes as he opens the book, he says, he's actually quite saddened because he talks about a course that he has, and he asked that question to Jewish students in his class. And he's quite disappointed and despondent at the responses of those that the Jewish students who answer. They basically say we're Jewish because we were born Jewish. And that being Jewish is quite ordinary. And then he quotes some non-Jews. Some non-Jews, not Jewish students, but non-Jewish scholars who speak glowingly about what Judaism has brought the world, saying that Judaism is contribution to the world is quite extraordinary. How could this be? That those outside of our tradition can look and see the gifts that the Jews have given to the world and our extraordinary existence, yet the average Jew sees it as quite ordinary. And therefore he writes this book. He writes this book to answer that question, why be Jewish? Why is it extraordinary? Writing it not to the non-Jew, writing to the Jew, writing to us. Why? When we live in a world of choice, why be Jewish? And I'd like to, just gonna share my screen. I'd like to study a little text that Rabbi Sacks works off of to kind of start to set up his argument. So let me just share my screen. If you could hold on for a second. Here it is. So Rabbi Sacks opens early up in the book, and he quotes the psukim at the beginning, the very end of the Torah, towards the end of the Torah, the Parashat Nitzavim, when Hashem goes into a covenant with Bnei Israel. And he notes, look at the covenant. Hashem is going to make a covenant with you. Today, I'm going to establish this covenant. Leman, verse 12. You will be my nation, Hashem says. Actually, Moshe is speaking. You will be the nation of God. And he will be your God. Like was promised your ancestors, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is the fulfillment of the promise. The covenant that was made way back when in the beginning of Breshit with them, that you will be a great nation in a land. Now it's getting fulfilled through you. But here Rabbi Sacks says that's not only what it says. It's not only with you that I established this covenant. That's ala zot, and I'm a swear. I mean, we're binding each other together through this covenant. It's for those who are standing here and those who are this covenant is like no other. This covenant is being made by those who are here and those who are not yet here, which is us, all of us. Rabbi Sacks notes, what do you mean? How can you bind somebody who wasn't there to a covenant? This covenant is supposed to go through all generations, right? So first of all, Rashi points out All future generations are bound by this covenant. But how? By what method? By the way, Rabbi Sacks points out this is actually even a halachic principle. There's a halachic principle, which is called mushba ve'omei behar sinaihu, that I can't, in Judaism, I can take a swear or an oath to forbid something upon myself, but I can't forbid something upon myself that the Torah obligates me to do. Why? Mushba ve'omei behar sinaihu. I'm already bound. I already took an oath that sign. An oath I never took is an oath that I took. Because somehow at Sinai I took that oath, even though I never said a word. But by what method? By what method is this covenant? Listen to the key words, because these are the key words Rabbi Sacks is going to focus upon. His message. There's a covenant and continuity. By what method are we responsible as that covenant? Are we responsible for the continuity of that covenant? And I believe he hints at this, but I'm going to say it more explicitly. It's based on the following Gemara. It's based on the following Gemara. This Gemara discusses how we convert a minor child. Similar issue. And the rabbis amongst us, we this is something part of our job sometimes. Person adopts a baby. The baby is not halachically Jewish, and we need to convert the baby. The baby's a baby. The baby has not made a conscious decision to say, I want to live a life of Torah and mitzvah to be part of the Jewish people. Right? An adult comes to convert. Whole long process. And even at the last minute, we say, are you sure you want to do this? You know you are committing to all the mitzvot, and we make sure they commit to the mitzvot. A minor. So what do we do? Why? Based on what? My kamash malan. How are we allowed to do this? Gemara says, "Ischut hulo," because it is a benefit for the child. So it's a benefit, okay. And we have a halachic principle: Zachen la'adam shelo b'fanav. I can benefit for a person I can bring benefit for a person without them being present, or in other words, without their consent. The message clearly being, to be Jewish is a benefit. Doesn't mean the cut doesn't come with its challenges, doesn't mean it comes with its difficulties. But to be Jewish, our ancestors were able to do it for us on our behalf, and we are bound by it because it is an inherent benefit. The only problem is, and this is what Rabbi Sacks sets out to kind of determine, is that unfortunately, so many Jews don't realize the benefit and the gift that they've been born into. And therefore, in the modern world, we need to keep his book, needs to articulate it again, to remind us why it is such a benefit, to answer the question of why be Jewish. Because he notes modernity brought a real challenge. There's been challenges to Judaism throughout our history. He notes 4: destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple, persecutions. Specifically, he mentions the Spanish Inquisition, where either convert and be safe or be Jewish and face a threat. He mentions the Holocaust. But then he says the challenge of our time is not an external challenge, it's an internal challenge. That, as he notes, it's not from a threat. We'll get to anti-Semitism later, but rather it's people not, unfortunately, seeing the absolute benefit that Judaism is, and therefore choosing to leave. As he says, Jewish identity, it's on page 19 if anybody's following along, in the contemporary world is being transformed from fate to choice. Used to be, you were a Jew, you were a Jew, you were a Jew. From a fact of birth to a consciously chosen commitment. As significant numbers of young Jews are evidently unwilling to make that commitment. The future of the Jewish people is once again at risk, this time without the backdrop of external persecution. The question, why be Jewish, is raised again in a new and searching form. He says, for much of our history, Jews have seen themselves as a chosen people, not a choosing people. But in the modern world, the chosen people is not enough. We need to become a choosing people. We need to now answer the question of why be Jewish? And he states, Rabbi Sacks states, this question of why be Jewish is, he writes 21 years ago in year 2000, this search has taken up much of my life because the question asked doesn't go away. So how does he answer this question? I'm not going to fully answer the question. The whole book answers the question, so I'm not going to fully do it justice. I'm just going to give kind of the heading of how he answers the question. And it goes back to the two words that I focused upon in the text from Nitzavim. Brit, covenant, and for all generations, continuity. Two C's. Continuity and covenant. This is where Rabbi Sacks is going to go in the direction of saying, this is why we need to be Jewish. Because being Jewish is about a partnership with God, because we bring something unique to the world that nobody else can bring, the covenant between us and people. And that message can only be done through us. We're the link in that chain. We're the link in that chain. We're the continuity. And therefore, he says, here comes the title of the book, A Letter in the Scroll. Okay. He quotes the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov teaches that the Torah is not just a book, but the Torah really encompasses the Jewish people. The Torah without the Jewish people is like any other book in the library. But the Torah with the Jewish people encompasses the essence of who we are. It can only continue on as a living Torah with us. And the Baal Shem Tov says, every one of us is represented by a letter in the Torah. And he beautifully describes the Torah. He says, the Torah, he says, I wonder if any people has ever loved the book as we love the Torah. We stand when it passes as if it were a king. We dance with it as if it were a bride. If it is desecrated or destroyed, we bury it as if it were a relative or a friend. We study it endlessly, looking for as if in it were hidden all the secrets of our being. Rabbi Sacks writes, as I just mentioned, the Baal Shem Tov said that the Jewish people is a living Sefer Torah, and every Jew is one of its letters. There's really two Sifrei Torah. There's the Sifrei Torah we read from, and then there's the Sefer Torah of the human being. I am moved by that image, and it invites the question, Rabbi Sacks says, will we in our lifetime be letters in the scroll of the Jewish people? Will we find our letter? As every Jew is a letter, every Jewish family is a word, every community is a pasuk, and the Jewish people at any one time are a paragraph. The Jewish people through time constitute a story, the strangest and most moving story of the annals of mankind. We're part of a story. The story of our Torah began way before us and will continue way after us. Will we be a letter in that scroll? And I quote again, as Jews felt a loyalty to generations past and generations yet unborn to continue the narrative. We have an obligation, he says, to continue that narrative, to be part of that story. And Rabbi Sacks says that story of a covenant of a people with God who bring things to the world in a unique way that only we can. Why be Jewish? Because we're the letter in the scroll. What do we know about a Sefer Torah that's missing a letter? It's puzzle, one letter in the middle of Torah reading. I don't happen to attend all of your shuls. Happens to us a few times. Middle of Torah. Actually, the worst was Simchas Torah when it happened. That was not good. Chassan Torah and made a puzzle. That was not good. Okay, but there it was. We had to pull out. There we were ready to finish the Torah and find the psul. We got to pull out another one of them. It needs to be whole. The Jewish people needs to be whole. I quote once again. Unlike almost every other vision of the ideal society, Jews knew that there was the work of many generations and that therefore they must hand on their ideals to their children so that they too would be part of the journey, letters in the scroll. We don't believe that in one generation we could fulfill the dream and the covenant of perfecting the world that God wants us to do. It's the long game. We're a blip in the screen, but an essential piece. To be a Jew, like Rabbi Sacks says, now as in the days of Moses, is to hear the call of those who come before us and know that we are the guardians of their story. We have inherited the book our ancestors wrote, the book of the living Judaism, and there is a letter that only we can write for our time. And here Rabbi Sacks concludes this paragraph, this chapter. I am a Jew, Rabbi Sacks says, because knowing the story of my people, I hear their call to write the next chapter. I did not come from nowhere. I have a past. And if any past commands anyone, this past commands me. I am a Jew because only if I remain a Jew will the story of 100 generations live on in me. I continue their journey because, having come this far, I may not let it and them fail. I cannot be the missing letter in the scroll. I can give no simpler answer, nor do I know of a more powerful one. The rest of the book goes through all the messages, the unique messages that Judaism brings to the world, brings to our life. But Rabbi Sacks says at the core, we have a responsibility to not be the missing letter, to be the letter, to carry on everything that came before us, and make sure that that's carried on, that the story, the legacy continues way beyond us. Because he uses this word. It's a journey. It's a journey that started way before us, the Jewish people. It's related covenant with God, and it's a journey that will go on way beyond us. Back to those two key words, covenant and continuity. Why be Jewish? Covenant and continuity. In today's day and age, and why, by the way, I find it interesting, and I've always been troubled. You talk to certain groups, And their reason for existence is continuity, Jewish continuity, Jewish continuity, Jewish continuity. I've always found that lacking. What's continuity for continuity's sake? Meaning you got to live for something. Just to say we're going to survive for survival's sake, there's got to be something. And what I found fascinating, Rabbi Sacks' core message, why be Jewish, is continuity. But his continuity is a continuity of depth. It's not, let's just make sure that there continue to be Jews. No, let's make sure there continue to be Jews, because without Jews, there's no Judaism. There needs to be two Sifrei Torah. The Sefer Torah we read from and the Sefer Torah that we live through. And therefore, that's the continuity of the covenant, of a unique partnership that we have with God. A beautiful, powerful message. If I may, I want to then jump to the end of the book, almost the end of the book. As I said, there's so much I could talk about, but this next to last chapter of the book really spoke to me as it relates to what we're facing now with anti-Semitism. Rabbi Sacks, you're going to see I'm going to get to anti-Semitism. That's going to emerge from one of Rabbi Sacks' worldviews. Rabbi Sacks wrote this. This is a particular book, as I said. It's about why be Jewish, even though we know one of the greatest Rabbi Sacks is he was universalist. He was a particularist, but he felt that we needed to relate to the broader world. One of Rabbi Sacks, he actually talks about his struggle when he was in university. He says, I'm attracted to all these ideas of the non-Jewish world. And in no way did he reject them. I mean, he rejected some, obviously, but to devote himself to the Jewish people. And it was finding this voice of knowing who you are is the best way actually to impact the world. I don't think it's him who uses this image, but it's an image that I've heard, which is the shofar image. From the narrow can be broad. But if you don't know who you are, you actually cannot impact the world. You need to know deeply who you are. And I'm going to share a couple anecdotes in which Rabbi Sacks shares this idea that it's only in knowing who you are, by being different, can you truly impact the world. And in fact, here's the next step. By knowing who you are and knowing your identity is actually the best way to fight anti-Semitism. Allow me to explain. Rabbi Sacks said, you know what Yaakov's challenge was early on in life? He wanted to be Esav. Yaakov wanted to be Esav. He wanted Esav's blessing to come to him. He disguised himself as Esav. Esav was the firstborn. He wanted to be the firstborn. Oh no. Oh no. All right, I'm sorry. My computer just shut down and I got it back up. Everybody here? Okay. Thank you for all hanging in there. Here, I'm back. 1 second. Okay. Okay. So back to where we were. Okay. So Rabbi Sacks comes and says Yaakov's problem is he wanted to be Esav. Everything about Yaakov was trying to be Esav. When did Yaakov finally become Yisrael? Is when he finally realized, I don't want to be Esav anymore. I want to be who I am. This is a major problem that too many Jews want to be the from the outside world. They don't want to be identifiably Jewish. And they think maybe if I do that and I hide my Judaism, it won't be anti-Semitism and I'll be part of the broader world and everything will all good. And he says, that's a huge mistake. And don't think that will, because of that, this will go away. He brings a couple stories to highlight this. He states, he remembers a story from his youth. When he was a child walking home from shul, and he kept his kippah on. And somebody goes to his father, Rabbi Sacks' father, and says, your son has forgotten to take his yarmulke off. This is when it wasn't so common to wear a kippah in public. The old dictum, be a Jew at home, a man in the street. My father got angry and replied, no child of mine will ever be ashamed to be Jewish in public. And we continued on our way. It was not a very tactful response, Rabbi Sacks says, but it taught me, and perhaps no more formal lesson could, never to be ashamed of who I was. The second story is a story of an encounter. What I love about these stories is you see how they formulate Rabbi Sacks' identity. The second story is about an encounter he had with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He often spoke about the influence the Lubavitcher Rebbe had on him and Rabbi Soloveitchik had on him. And he wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe from university, because he said to him, he said, I'm totally taken by the world of Mozart and Milton and Beethoven and Shakespeare. And he said, I wrote a note to the Rebbe and told him of my conflict. I wanted to live more fully as a Jew, but at the same time, I was reluctant to give up my love of art and literature, music and poetry, most of which had been created by non-Jews and had nothing to do with Judaism. The Rebbe wrote me back an answer in the form of a parable. Imagine, he said, two people, both of whom have spent their lives carrying stones. One carries rocks, the other diamonds. Now imagine that they are both asked to carry emeralds. To the man who spent his life transporting rocks, emeralds too are rocks, a burden, a weight. After a lifetime, this is how he sees what he's asked to carry. But to the man who has spent his life carrying diamonds, emeralds too are precious stones. So it is, he said, with different civilizations and faiths. To the person for whom faith is just a burden, so to our other faiths. He does not value his own. How then can he value someone else's? But to the person to whom his own faith is precious, so to our others. This is on page 210. Because he cherishes his own, he values someone else's. His may be diamonds, the other emeralds, but he sees the beauty in each. So the Rebbe ended. In most cases, if not all, you will find your attachment to Judaism, I love this, will heighten your appreciation of the gifts of other cultures. In other words, the more deeply you value what is yours, the more you will value the achievement of others. And then Rabbi Sacks says in his own words, I found that those who are most at ease in their own faith have a capacity to recognize identity